I'm Kevin Cirilli, host of the Daily Debrief, and I'm joined now by my friend and colleague Julia Manchester, who is snowed in her hotel room on the campaign trail in Des Moines, Iowa. Julia, how is the snow impacting the Iowa caucus?
Well, Kevin, the snow and the extreme temperatures we're expecting on Monday is really turning into the big story. So starting today, we've seen that the pro-DeSantis super PAC Never Back Down and Nikki Haley's campaign have postponed a number of events. Nikki Haley's campaign choosing to do some teletown halls instead. But, in the final days before caucus, when there are some caucus goers who are undecided, that's a big deal because these campaigns want to really reach out to as many people as possible and get them to get their friends to come out and caucus with them. Then going forward to Monday, we are seeing temperatures in the lows of the mid-teens on Monday, negative mid-teens, I should say. That could very well impact turnout. But, Kevin, a lot of the voters I've been talking to have said, look, we're from the Midwest. We're from Iowa. We get it. We'll be prepared. This is important to us. We want to go out and make our voices heard, and the campaigns are certainly really trying to reinforce that message as well.
Well, for many folks, it's a 3-day weekend, too. So there's that factored into this as well with Martin Luther King Day. So it's freezing cold. It's Martin Luther King Day. It's going to come down to turnout. And this, I think, is where the operations of the campaign really is going to be tested. Like, which campaign, based on your reporting, has the buses that are going to be able to, number one, can they even get on the roads? Can they transport the voters? And number two, are they able to even have the operation to mobilize these folks to show up for them? So from your reporting, which campaign is best prepared for this?
I have spoken to some voters who have said they can't come out and caucus because they have to work on a Monday. Look, in terms of the campaign's operations, this is where you see the DeSantis campaign really talking about their investment in Iowa, talking about the fact that they've knocked so many doors from the beginning, that so many voters have been able to meet him in person. So they're very much touting that. For the Haley campaign, I thought it was interesting. I went to one of her events yesterday in a suburb of Des Moines, and the crowd was asked, how many of you are seeing Nikki Haley in person for the first time? And a majority of the room raised their hands. That's huge because it shows that there's still, people who are shopping around, looking to, see all the candidates, decide which one they're going to choose. In terms of the roads, though, we're getting snow today. From being in Des Moines before and being here this weekend, I have seen that they're very good about clearing the roads as fast as they can. So if the blizzard comes and passes through Saturday and Sunday and the roads are clear by Monday night, that's going to make it much easier. The problem is, though, a lot of the temperatures are just so dangerous. And the number I gave you, those negative teens, that's without wind chill.
Well, it is dangerous. Having covered previous election cycles, we were talking about this before coming on air, Julia. Staffers are often the ones who are also impacted by this, young staffers who are driving in these conditions, and they have to be careful. No one wants a tragedy, regardless of their political affiliation, and it's so important that folks be safe when they go to the polls, when they are voting, participating, the poll workers, or the caucus workers, rather, and the organizers. It takes a lot to get these facilities open. This is not just show up to the ballot box and cast your vote. This is a much more a process that demands a lot more conversation, does it not?
Absolutely. I mean, you hear the campaigns talking about commit to caucus. And that means you hear, coming up with a plan to vote on election day, coming up with a plan to vote on a primary. But committing to caucus is actually a real commitment. I mean, you have to go in person to your precinct. You have to stay there probably for an hour or more. It's a process. This isn't just a swing by your polling place, cast your ballot, and leave. So these campaigns are really trying to get these caucus goers to come up with a plan. And, talking to the DeSantis campaign in particular, they're saying, like I said before, this is where their ground game comes in. This is why it's been so important that DeSantis has spent so much time in Iowa. But at the same time, Kevin, I mean, the polls do not really reflect that at this point. I mean, you have Donald Trump leading, but a recent Suffolk University poll shows Nikki Haley now in second place in Iowa, and that's reflected in our Hill Decision Desk HQ average. So, talking to the DeSantis campaign about the state of the polls, they say, look, the primary season is like an NFL season. There's multiple games, so there's multiple chances, but it all depends on whether that campaign or any campaign has enough money and momentum going into New Hampshire.
That's spin, right? I mean, if Ron DeSantis and his campaign, let's call it like it is, doesn't finish in second place in Iowa, it is going to be, I don't see a path forward for him based on the reporting that I'm doing, the sources that I'm talking with. How does he go to New Hampshire and South Carolina, having finished in third place in Iowa, when his campaign and his super PAC have said that they're banking it all on Iowa? In contrast to that, should Nikki Haley, as that Suffolk University Decision Desk HQ poll that just came out, finish in second place, this thing is a two-person race. And suddenly it becomes, who does Vivek endorse? Who does DeSantis endorse if he gets out of the race? Will Chris Christie endorse? Senator Joe Manchin's up there in New Hampshire giving a politics and eggs breakfast to talk about, I guess, openly ruminating about a third-party candidacy. We should note the Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan's going to be in Washington the days after the Iowa caucus. So there's a lot that's happening, and if the stakes for DeSantis, correct me if I'm wrong, could not be higher for him to finish in second place. That is the expectation, is it not?
That is the expectation. And I think it also depends on how well former President Trump does. Former President Trump has set the expectation of finishing at 50% or more in the caucuses, and that's being reflected in the polls as well. Now, in terms of whether that will happen, we don't know. There's so many factors. We know that the caucuses have more surprises just because of the nature of a caucus. And then, of course, you have the weather playing a big role in this. So we don't know. But if DeSantis finishes in second place and it's far behind former President Trump, and Haley's also down there with him in third place, I mean, it's difficult to see how he continues. I mean, I think at that point there could be a case made for him to have, try to continue to New Hampshire. But his ground game, DeSantis's ground game in New Hampshire, is not the same as it is in Iowa. His campaign is banking on momentum going from Iowa to New Hampshire. But like Iowa, New Hampshire voters want to see their candidates there in person. So I think that might be part of the reason why you're seeing DeSantis in the polls not polling as well in the Granite State.
Well, and undeclared voters can vote in a New Hampshire primary, which is very different than the Iowa caucus. Final question for you. You and I talk about this all the time, and it's what sets you apart, quite honestly, Julia, from all of the other journalists on the campaign trail, which is that the mainstream media talks about certain issues, Trump, never Trump, Biden, age, all of these other issues or other storylines and narratives. But when you talk to voters, what are they actually telling you? What are the Iowans telling you and the Republicans in Iowa telling you about what they're actually are the issues that they're using for who they are going to caucus for? What are they saying to you?
The economy is such a huge issue. And I think the state of the country, whether it's the economy, crime, even the state of Capitol Hill in Congress. I spoke to one, independent voter who came out to see Nikki Haley yesterday. She had voted for Biden in 2020, but was impressed by Nikki Haley. So she came out to see her. And she was saying, this wasn't the country I grew up in. The economy isn't great. Crime is higher. There's the situation at the southern border. I think there's just this discontent and, feeling of uneasiness about voters. So that's what I'm hearing. When you go to these Haley and DeSantis events, I haven't been to a Trump event yet on the ground, weather permitting. I'm hoping to follow him out to the western part of the state tomorrow. But at the Haley and DeSantis events, you do hear some discontent about former President Trump. I don't think a lot of these voters necessarily dislike former President Trump, but they think it's past his time. They want to see a new face coming in. But when asked, who do you think will win the caucuses ultimately, they say it's likely going to be President Trump because of the polls and because of his status as a former president who is essentially, in a way, the incumbent running here.
All right, Julia Manchester, excellent reporting. Thank you for your time. If you do end up going to one of those rallies, please be careful, Julia, my friend. I will see you when you are back in Washington, D.C. Thank you again.
Thanks, Kevin.